morning. I'm Eric Blank, and this is the Commissioner's Weekly Meeting for Wednesday, October 2nd, 2024. Commissioner Plan, any preliminary remarks? Are you ready to approve the consent agenda?
I would vote to approve the consent agenda. Thanks.
Commissioner Gilman?
Good morning, everyone. I would also vote to approve the consent agenda.
As would I. Mr. Riley, Ms. McLaughlin, rules regulating vehicle booting.
Good morning, Commissioners. Nate Riley with Transportation Staff, along with Aaron McLaughlin of your Commission Council. Today we would like to bring forward a Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, or NOPR, which incorporates updates and clarifications to the Commission's rules for vehicle booting companies. On May 30th, 2019, Governor Jared Polis signed Senate Bill 19236, which implemented recommendations contained within the PUC's 2018 Sunset Review. One such recommendation was for the PUC to start regulating the vehicle booting industry at the state level. On December 30th, 2019, the Commission adopted temporary rules for vehicle booting companies effective January 1, 2020, with the permanent rules being subsequently adopted on October 15th, 2020. This NOPR includes various updates and clarifications to the originally adopted permanent rules for vehicle booting companies. Such updates include language consistencies and other congruences with the Commission's rules for the towing industry, which is inherently linked to the vehicle booting company operations. Two of the more prominent proposed changes include a modification to the definition of the term boot, will clarify what types of vehicle immobilization devices are subject to the statutory regulations under Part 8 of 4010.1 CRS, as well as the inclusion of a mechanism that allows the Commission to address instances when vehicle booting companies' requisite insurance policies expire or are voluntarily canceled. Since the Commission has been regulating the vehicle booting industry for almost 5 years now, it seems appropriate time to bring these rules back to the table and make some necessary improvements. At this time, we're happy to answer any questions you may have, or if you like, we can provide a recommendation.
Yeah, I'd welcome your recommendation.
It is recommended that the Commission open a notice of proposed rulemaking in regards to the aforementioned amendments to the vehicle booting company rules and refer the matter to an ALJ.
Commissioner Plant?
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gelman?
Yeah, maybe just one question to Mr. Riley. I noticed the change in several instances of just a reference to vehicles to a reference to motor vehicles. And I think my understanding from you is that's in order to align with specific definition that already exists. So just want to confirm that and confirm our intent is not to in any way limit from what is already covered as we move forward with the NOPR.
Yeah, that's correct. Basically, our intent here is not to in any way restrict what is currently regulated under the current framework, but rather to just bring the language into consistency with the terminology we use in a lot of our other different rules, including the towing industry. So yes, the intent is not to in any way try to backtrack or anything like that. It's more just clarification and language consistency.
Okay, certainly I agree with that, and to the extent that anyone wishes to address in comments, if they see that as a narrowing or any sort of concern, I think we'd be interested in those sort of comments to ensure that we maintain the breadth that we expect.
I likewise support the recommendation, as do I support Commissioner Goman's request to add language with that invitation into the order. Would that work for you, Commissioner Plant?
Yes, it does.
And that can be an ABC decision, opening a rulemaking, issuing a NOPR, and proposed rules, and referring the matter to an ALJ. So thank you, Mr. Riley. Mr. Riley, Black Bear Transportation.
Thank you, Chair. Again, Nate Riley with Transportation Staff, along with Mitch DeCenzo of your Commission Council. For your consideration today is an application for rehearing, re-argument, or reconsideration, or RRR, as filed in this matter by the petitioner, Black Bear Transportation, LLC. As to background, on July 29, 2024, petitioner filed a petition for a waiver of Rule 6305, luxury limousine, as it pertains to a 2022 Toyota Sienna XSE. This waiver was requested for a 2-year period. In support, petitioner indicated that the underlying vehicle had a purchase value of $45,000 and described the vehicle as a sporty, sleek, luxurious, spacious, and comfortable. Petitioner listed several luxury features, including an all-black exterior and black synthetic leather interior stitching, second row captain's chairs, a powered sunroof, ample storage and multiple cup holders, 4-zone automatic climate control, and wireless smartphone charging. Petitioner also listed several safety features, including pre-collision systems, automatic emergency braking, driver assist, lane departure alert, and pedestrian detection. Petitioner described the potential clientele as those needing private airport transportation, exploring shops in the Steamboat Springs area, weddings, concerts, wine festivals, and miscellaneous other events in Routt County. The Commission denied petitioner's request for waiver pursuant to decision number C-240604, issued on August 21st, 2024. The reason for this denial, as cited in the decision, included the specific make model of the underlying vehicle and its conflicts with Rule 6305A3, considering the vehicle is classified as a minivan by the manufacturer. To the present filing, petitioner filed an application for RRR on September 19th, 2024, which was timely filed. In the RRR, petitioner suggests that the manufacturer classification should not be the key point of analysis by the Commission, regardless of regarding the fitness of the vehicle to be qualified as a luxury limousine. Petitioner again identified the luxury features of the vehicle, as had already been stated, which petitioner claims are nearly identical to those found in other luxury SUVs manufactured by Acura, Audi, and Volvo. Petitioner also argues that they should not be penalized for their ability to identify and purchase a vehicle with these luxury features at a level that is below market value. Petitioner states that there is a need for luxury transportation in the Steamboat Springs area, especially in the winter months. Before opening the matter up for discussion, it should be noted that the Commission has previously expressed an intent to explore amendments to Rule 6305, which will likely be included in an upcoming passenger transportation NOPR that is currently being drafted. At this time, Chair, would you like to open the matter up for discussion?
I would. I guess after our discussion last week, I've been increasingly struggling with a rule and how bright line it is. It sounds like if the vehicle's purchased for $50,000 and $50,001, it's viewed as a luxury vehicle, but if it's purchased for $49,999, it's not. And I just think that's too sharp a distinction, and appreciate your willingness to look at our rules. So I'd probably grant this request, especially given the shortage of transportation from Steamboat and Routt County to the airport. And I guess before I turn it over to my colleagues, I guess, Mr. Riley, any concerns if we were to, or counsel, any concerns if we were to grant the waiver, given that the rules are under review anyway?
Well, yes, as I stated, this is something that appears to be on the agenda moving forward, is to take a look at Rule 6305 and kind of, I guess, weigh where it is right now and where the Commission would like to see it go in the future. We've seen kind of I'd say over the last 10 plus years, we've seen kind of a slow but sure chipping away of the qualifications for luxury limousine vehicles, and I think the Commission has been very flexible in their expansion of various categories and allowing new vehicles to come into those qualified categories. Yeah, I guess one of the primary concerns here would be just the consistency with previous Commission decisions in regards to this particular make and model of vehicle.
I think I'm ready to waive our rules. Commissioner Plant, thoughts?
Consistency is a hobgoblin. Is that what they're saying? Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's I'm glad the rule is under review. I think this is a really sort of a vague standard. You know, I mean, to emphasize the point, a part of their argument is that the vehicle is black. That's luxury. You know, so yeah, I would agree with you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Goldman, I know you're more a rule follower than maybe the two of us. Thoughts?
You'll see. Yeah, I mean, the issue here is not only on the purchase price, but also on the specific prohibitions of minivans. So it's twofold to me under the rule. Makes it a little harder to waive. I mean, that being said, we've struggled with this for years, and it's not fixed yet. So I kind of agree in terms of my patience is wearing thin to break through what feels like a blockade in, you know, I think allowing more transportation options in certain areas. That being said, I think the rules are quite clear. So, you know, it feels somewhat arbitrary to be doing it before we actually take action on improving the rules. And I wonder to what degree kind of fitting a car in the luxury limousine category is a proxy for just transportation needs in general. I'm not sure if people need luxurious transportation. It may just be in areas they need transportation. And this is perhaps the most flexible category, despite several criteria on the type of vehicle. You know, if it's not appropriate to pursue a taxi or something else, this might be kind of the easiest entry point, despite the specific vehicle prohibitions. So my preference would be to wait and change the rule, but I think I'm running out of time to see those rule changes before we get to more arbitrary decision making.
You've been here 5 years. So, are you inclined to dissent?
I am, but in favor of a swift rulemaking to address this issue. And I think we have to address the broader issue. Like, is this just a proxy for wider transportation options? You know, given the kind of structure that the legislature has several of these transportation options under, you know, what are our best tools to ensure really that every market has availability of, you know, affordable transportation options. But I would prefer to do it by rule before we do it on individual applications, which I think is inconsistent with how we've treated some in the past.
Commissioner Plan, has Commissioner Goman changed your mind?
No, you know, I think, you know, part of the thing that I think we need to consider in this specific case, but also as we reconsider the rule, is that the needs of somebody going to a place like Steamboat, you know, might require a great deal more gear, you know, a lot more space. You know, having a prohibition on you know, a minivan may actually work to the detriment of, you know, some of these towns where their recreational opportunities involve, you know, something larger than a suitcase. And so, you know, I think that, you know, it would behoove us to be a little bit flexible on this issue. So I would still support your motion, Mr. Chairman.
So, Mr. Riley, I think that's can be an ABC decision, 2-1 granting the application for triple R. And are you okay with a footnote, or would you like to write something?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be super formal, whatever is the most appropriate mechanism. I disagree in principle, but I'm somewhat with you in spirit.
I'll let the record reflect that. Proceeding number...
Oh, sorry, Chair, just one point of clarification just to tie this one off. So if the commission has found through the 2-1 vote that petitioner has shown good cause to waive Rule 6305 in this instance, the commission decision should also include that a copy of the decision shall be maintained in the vehicle in accordance with Rule 6107B, and that the vehicle is required to pass and keep in the vehicle a copy of an inspection in accordance with Rule 6117B. Also, I would like to clarify the time period for the granted waiver. Would that mirror the 2-year requested time period in the original petition, or for a different period?
I would say 2 years, consistent with the application. Is that okay with you, Commissioner Plain?
Yes.
Does that give you what you need to do an ABC order, Mr. Riley?
It does. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Proceeding number 24M-0311T. Ms. Ray?
morning, Commissioners. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Thank you. Good morning. Gladys Ray, joined by Megan Ruitt from your telecom staff. Commission Rule 2848 directs the High Cost Administrator to provide the Commission with an update on the amount of actual high cost surcharge contributions versus estimated projections received for the first 6 months of the calendar year. For 2024, projected contributions were $19 million, or $4.75 million to be collected per calendar quarter. Estimates for the year 2024 were $19.8 million in surcharge collections that were reported to the Commission at the end of 2023 in our legislative report. For this memo, we used half of that annual amount, or $9.9 million, as forecasted amount for the first 6 months of 2024. Actual collections for the first 6 months of 2024 were $10.1 million. The collection was up 3.9% this year compared to the projections estimated in 2023. Based on the actual collections received for the high cost for the first half of 2024, staff does not recommend any adjustments to the existing 2.6% surcharge for 2025, so that the total collections does not exceed $25 million pursuant to Title 40-15-208. Staff has prepared this memo to address to the Commissioners and proposes to include this required communication in proceeding 24M0311. Was open in July 2024 for the reporting of the revenues of the telecommunications providers for the first 6 months of 2024. No action is needed by the Commission on this memo, but I can pause for any questions.
Commissioner Plant,
I have no questions.
Commissioner Goman.
No questions.
Thank you for your presentation. Greatly
Thank you.
appreciate it. Proceeding number 22A-0230E, Ms. Reedon, Black Hills ERP RRR.
Good morning, Commissioners. On September 24th, 2024, Black Hills Colorado Electric filed its application for rehearing, re-argument, or reconsideration, which I'll call the RRR, of the Commission's Phase 2 decision. This morning, I'll tee up for your discussion some procedural issues regarding this RRR. As background, the Commission issued the Phase 2 decision in this proceeding on September 4th, 2024. In the Phase 2 decision, the Commission approved a Modified Clean Energy Plan, or CEP. That includes a resource portfolio comprised of a 50-megawatt storage project and 2 separate solar projects. One of the more substantial modifications the Commission made was the change from bid 114-05A, a 200-megawatt build transfer agreement, or BTA, solar project, to bid 114-08, essentially the same 200-megawatt solar project, but this is a power purchase agreement, or PPA. And for the benefit of the listening public, a BTA is a project that is built by a third-party developer, but ultimately sold to the company to own and operate. In contrast, the PPA project is built, owned, and operated by a third-party developer. In the Phase 2 decision, the Commission explained its concern that, absent a performance incentive mechanism, or PIM, customers largely bear the risk that BTA projects will go over budget on construction costs or will produce less energy than anticipated. These concerns led the Commission to impose a cost-to-construct PIM for the 50-megawatt storage BTA and to switch from the 200-megawatt solar BTA to the 200-megawatt solar PPA. Turning to Black Hills RRR, the company spends considerable time urging the Commission to reconsider the replacement of bid 114-05A, the solar BTA, with bid 114-08, the solar PPA. Black Hills asserts that the BTA solar project is less expensive than the PPA version, and that the company has essentially the same ability to control cost increases with BTAs or PPAs. In addition, Black Hills states that it is willing to file a PIM for the solar BTA project. Another core piece of the company's RRR is that Black Hills provides updated pricing information for the approved and backup solar projects. The company states that it asked all the primary and backup solar bidders whether the original price of their bids could be held, and if not, to refresh their bid price. In its RRR, Black Hills provides the updated pricing information that it received as of September 20th, 2024, which is more than 2 weeks after the Commission's Phase 2 decision. Based on this updated price information, Black Hills seeks clarification as to the flexibility the company has to enter into PPA and BTA contracts with revised pricing. And as you know, much of the details regarding this updated pricing information and the company's proposal to move forward is highly confidential in order to help preserve competitive tension with the project. Given Black Hills' inclusion of new information in its RRR, a development which the company admits is typically not allowed, advisors have brought this matter before you to consider whether the Commission should take certain procedural actions. And I have a recommendation on those specific procedural actions if you would like.
Yes. With that recommendation, that'd be great.
Advisors recommend the Commission acknowledge Black Hills' inclusion of new information in its RRR and proactively invite interested interveners to respond to the company's RRR by October 11th, 2024. In doing so, the Commission would waive Rule 1506B, which prohibits responses to a RRR except upon motion. In addition, advisors recommend tolling the 30-day statutory time limit in Section 40-6-114, subsection 1. This will ensure that the Commission has adequate time to review the new information and any responses that are filed. To do this, the Commission would issue a decision granting Black Hills RRR for the sole purpose of tolling the statutory time limit. And to be clear, this grant would be procedural and undertaken only to toll the statutory time.
Thank you, Mr. Eden. Just to start off, I agree with the advisor recommendation to waive Rule 1506B and toll the 30-day statutory time limit by statute. This isn't the typical RRR, so this approach makes sense to me. Although it's too early to take a vote or reach any definitive outcome on the broader substantive issues, I did have some initial comments I'd like to share. In its RRR request regarding bid 114, Black Hills argues that against the conclusion in our Phase 2 decision that BTA costs cannot be controlled as well as PPA costs. The company asserts that the ability to control construction costs is between BTAs and PPAs is essentially equal, and our Phase 2 decision was thus based on an erroneous conclusion. Even if there is merit to the argument about construction costs, it doesn't capture the full picture for me. A PPA shifts 100% of lower than expected production risk to the project owner, while a BTA leaves that risk on customers without a PIM. Likewise, a PPA shifts 100% of the risk of operating cost overruns to the project owner, while a BTA places this risk on customers without a PIM. Similarly, absent a PIM, construction cost overruns in a BTA contract could benefit the developer because they'll get paid more, could benefit the utility because they'll end up with a higher rate base in ways that will harm customers. I don't see the same type of misaligned incentives in the PPA context. Finally, on this record, I remain concerned that Black Hills simply adopted the construction cost and production estimates from the project bidder and conducted no material independent project-specific analysis despite the cost of the project. Even so, after reviewing the RRR, it seems that Black Hills understands our concerns and appears willing to move forward in a way that addresses them. For example, Black Hills agrees that customer and utility incentives must be aligned now based on the economics as presented and asks that it be allowed to submit a PIM for the cost to construct and the operations of bid 114.05A. Likewise, the company states it takes no issues with the cost to construct PIM that we ordered for the 50 megawatt storage BTA. Like I said, I'm still thinking through all this, but perhaps there's a way we could allow Black Hills to move forward with bid 114.05, the BTA solar, subject to a construction PIM like others we've developed. For me, we'd also need to develop an operations PIM. To facilitate this PIM dialogue at this stage of the process, I'd like to ask for a limited clarification and update. More specifically, Black Hills provides updated pricing information for the approved backup solar projects in its RRR. but we don't have an updated Appendix A that supports the revised LEC's levelized energy cost. Also, the LEC calculations for BTA projects seem opaque, and we don't have the bidder supplied O&M and other costs to calculate annual expenses. I'd request that Black Hills provide by October 11th a detailed showing of how it calculated the revised LEC from the construction costs, operating expenses, and other project inputs for all BTA projects listed on Table 3 of the company's RRR. In other words, the approved and backup BTA projects. For instance, in Appendix A, the company provides the levelized annual energy payment, a key input into the levelized energy cost. But at least for the BTA projects, the company does not provide how it calculated these. In addition, I'd allow the company to file a proposed construction and operational PIM for bid 114.5, but given the urgency, would require such a filing by October 11th. On other risks to the company as project owners, I'm inclined to agree with the company that there should be something like a force majeure concept to these PIMs, and I think this should be based on the force majeure reopener language in the model PPA contract. In sum, if the fundamental construction of customer production of customer and operational PIMs was put in place now, based on the economics that Black Hills is asserting as it seeks approval in this proceeding, I think I can get comfortable with allowing Black Hills to move forward with bid 114.05. Finally, if we ultimately decide to take this approach with a BTA with a PIM for bid 114, perhaps any other solar project would stay as a PPA. Do you think there are benefits to having a mix of PPA and utility ownership? So again, without resolving the full substantive issues, I wanted to share my initial reactions. So Commissioner Plant, are you open to requesting additional information from Black Hills and inviting them, if they're so inclined, to submit a PIM? Any thoughts, comments, anywhere you'd like to go?
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I agree with the requests that you're submitting there for more information from them, and the request to submit operational and construction PIM. And I would also support the advisor recommendation on that RRR to toll the bill. But I think you've covered it all. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Gilman, anywhere you'd like to go?
I'll start with, I support the survivor. That might be what he has with the ERP. I don't know.
That may be more accurate than you know.
Sitting there alone. The advisor recommendation, sorry, Mr. Eden, with regard to tolling the clock. But I will say I want to keep our focus on moving this forward as quickly as possible so that we don't cause more delay. Certainly one thing that was unwelcome, unideal to see is the potential for increased bids here, especially when we started with bids that were already significantly more expensive than what we were seeing in public service, and that already caused a lot of concern. And I think the one thing that is unique here versus public services, ERP, and kind of their follow-on process to look at bids is we have seen significantly fewer delays here. We're much shorter on the timeline from bids to where we are right now. So I think it's incumbent upon us as we move forward to make sure we move this along as swiftly as possible. I think the process you laid out is necessary because of what was contained in that filing. But just to be sure that we're moving things forward and none of those increased costs are a result of any delays to happen here, that would be really ideal. But with regard to your extra information, I'm supportive of that. I think I'm stretching my brain, but I feel like in the last CRP, I was somewhat more squishy on what should be used for the force majeure language. I'm not quite as certain as you. So perhaps I would soften the language a little, as that could be a reference to look at. I'm not certain it would be the reference that would be used. I think that's maybe a modification I've made in the past. So that might be the only modification I would offer to your recommendation, but happy to move forward requesting that information.
I'm okay with the modification suggested by Commissioner Gilman. Are you okay with that, Commissioner Plant?
Yes, I am.
I guess, given all that, Mr. Eden, I'd probably give the other parties until October 18th to respond to the company's filing. And we just got this filing like on Thursday or Friday last week or Monday.
It was September 24th, I believe, which is, Tuesday of last week.
So we're moving as best we can.
You see light speed.
You see light speed. Anything else, Mr. Eden? And just a personal thanks for helping me work through the details of this in a very compressed time frame.
Sure. I just wanted to confirm, it sounds like that last point you wanted to extend the deadline for responses to October 18th.
Does that work?
Yeah, I think that works and is appropriate, especially with the new information coming in on October 11th, and also works given the Commission's decision to toll the statutory block. I just wanted to check with the other two commissioners on that last point.
Commissioner Plant?
Yes, I agree.
Commissioner Gomez?
Yeah, I think it's necessary they'd be able to see what comes in before filing those.
And I think that can be an ABC decision consistent with your recommendation in this conversation. So thank you, Mr. Reed.
Thank you.
24A-0380EG, Mr. Davis and Mr. Foreman.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Ron Davis, and I'm another survivor of the Public Utilities Commission.
We may need more than one. One winner, one survivor.
And I'm joined by Mr. Wyatt Foreman, Commission Counsel. On September 5th, the Public Service Company of Colorado filed an application seeking to create a regulatory asset. This asset would track and defer above or below what is included in base rates the cost of excess liability insurance premiums. The company wants this general accounting order to become effective on October 18th. That's the day when the renewed insurance policy takes effect. Public Service asked the Commission to approve the establishment of this regulatory asset before the end of this year. Public Service states that due to increasing wildfire risk, the company anticipates its excess liability insurance premiums will increase dramatically. The company emphasizes that despite these higher costs for premiums, it's still prudent for the company to maintain excess liability insurance to limit the risk of catastrophic claims that cause the company to incur financial stresses and ultimately increase costs to customers. Public Service also asserts the deferral will provide needed support to facilitate the company's obtaining excess liability insurance and to support the company as it faces evolving wildfire risks. Public Service filed a motion for expedited treatment with its application. The company is asking the Commission to hear the matter en banc to assist this expedited consideration. But should the Commission decide to refer the matter to an administrative law judge, the company alternatively requests that the Commission find it necessary for the Commission itself to issue the initial Commission decision. The motion provides no proposed hearing dates or filing deadlines and is silent on discovery parameters. Now, for background this morning, the Commission established a shortened notice and intervention period for the application, requiring pleadings to be filed no later than September 27th. The Commission also granted the company's request to set the response deadline to that procedural motion to the same day. The Colorado Office of the Utility Consumer Advocate and staff of the Commission have each timely filed a notice of intervention of right and request for hearing, and the Colorado Energy Consumers, or who we call CEC, also filed a motion to intervene and request a hearing in this matter as well. UCA states that it plans to examine the need for this asset, the cost of the insurance, and the potential impact on future rates from the company's request. UCA filed no response to the procedural motion. Trial staff similarly seeks to examine the proposed mechanism of the deferral, the insurance projects, and the covered liabilities, how such insurance coverage might impact other costs, such as those of financing, and the rate of return proposed on the deferred account. And like the UCA, staff filed no response to the procedural motion. So I think with the request for hearing from the interveners of right, I'd like to pause and present the first decision point, and that is whether you're persuaded by public service that it's necessary to render a decision on the company's request by the end of this year. And if you are persuaded, then Commission Counsel Wyatt Foreman will present CEC's motion.
I think we'd appreciate a recommendation on this one.
Okay. I think there is a legitimate need to address this matter on an expedited basis because the costs could be significant here. But I also think this case resolves a very narrow question, and that is the final decision in this case is whether to give public service the ability to recover a certain level of costs in the future that may not be fully included in a test year in a base rate proceeding. So I see this as a narrow question, and if expedited procedures are found to be warranted, then the Commission should hear this matter en banc and address CEC's permissive intervention this morning and hear what it wants to examine in this case when it goes to hearing.
Commissioner Plant?
I would agree with that recommendation.
Commissioner Gelman?
I also agree with your recommendation.
That's what I.
Okay, I'll turn it over to Mr. Foreman.
Morning, Commissioners. Wyatt Foreman of your Commission Counsel. As Mr. Davis indicated, I'll briefly address the interventions filed in this proceeding and then back over to him for procedural consideration. Under Rule 1401B, no decision is necessary for timely and appropriately filed notices of intervention, right? However, for request for permissive intervention under 1401C, movements are required to demonstrate a pecuniary or tangible interest that may be substantially affected by the proceeding, and that the interest would not otherwise be adequately represented in the proceeding. Mr. Davis already discussed, timely and appropriately filed notices of interventions of right were filed by UCA and trial staff. UCA and staff are therefore parties in this proceeding. For the Commission's consideration under the permissive intervention standard, only CEC filed for permissive intervention. CEC states that public service, trial staff, and UCA do not take a position on its motion. CEC asserts that it has a direct, tangible, and pecuniary interest in the company's deferred insurance premium tracking, which it describes as implicating single-issue rate-making. CEC asserts that its interest in the proceeding principally concern whether deferred accounting is the appropriate rate-making treatment for public services excess liability insurance costs, as well as the following: percentage of public services costs that are treated in piecemeal fashion, shielding public service from risk, unlike a more risk-balanced approach of recovery through base rates, the availability of any actuarial studies that lend credence to the rising excess liability insurance costs within Xcel Energy's respective operating companies, and what portion, if any, is attributable to public services' potential involvement in the Marshall Fire, and 3, the criteria to protect ratepayers, such as a limit on the amount of deferred or sunset of the mechanism. Deferred accounting mechanism is entertained. CEC asserts that as an association entirely comprised of large industrial electric customers with unique service requirements, its interest will not be adequately represented by another party. The motion also emphasizes that it supports the request for en banc consideration, requests a hearing, and that it objects to a decision on the application being rendered prior to October 18th. But otherwise, the motion does not address the company's request for expedited procedures. Considering the other parties do not take a position on CEC's intervention, considering the standards in Rule 1401, Council believes granting the permissive intervention request is appropriate. Therefore, I recommend that the Commission acknowledge the interventions of right of UCA and staff and grant CEC's request for permissive intervention. Pause for a vote here.
Commissioner Plant?
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gelman?
I also agree.
As do I.
So the next decision point for you this morning is what expedited procedures to adopt. But before we move there, I can also pause to answer your questions. And if there are no questions, I can move on to procedural recommendation.
Commissioner Plant, any questions?
Not at this time.
Commissioner Gelman?
I have 2 questions. You may or may not know the answer, but that's fine.
Okay.
So I think alluded to a bit in CEC's notice of intervention. Do we have any insight within the application the degree to which the increase in premiums is due to overall conditions in the industry or in the state versus specific circumstances or litigation related to wildfires specific to Public Service Company of Colorado?
Right. That's a great question. I think as suggested in CEC's intervention pleading, there are some questions about what the insurers took into account when they decided how much liability insurance should cost Xcel Energy. But some things to note that can be gleaned now from the read of the testimony is that Xcel Energy is the entity that secures this liability, and that the costs of that overall premium are then allocated to the operating company. So I think one of the items that will be examined in this case by the intervening parties go along those lines. The challenge, though, is that some of these issues are actuarial, and that's kind of the thinking process behind the insurers when they set the level of the premium. And I don't have much experience in that area, but I imagine that very confidential and very complex. The other aspect, though, is how do you divide up that overall premium level to the operating companies? And in the testimony, it looks like the company's share of the Xcel Energy liability premium has been pretty steady as a percentage of what Xcel Energy pays. I can't give you more details than that because Xcel Energy has claimed confidentiality of some of those numbers. But the basis for which the percentage is determined does have a mix of allocation principles, general allocation principles that in a rate case are examined in the context of a cost allocation and assignment manual, or a CAM. But other elements, I think, get to some of the details of what would be covered and with those kinds of risks that are faced by one utility versus another. There might be details about, limits on claims or things like that. So what we call in rate-making land direct assignment is how certain costs may be directly assigned from the Xcel Energy level to the Public Service Company of Colorado level. But there are also some things that are more generally allocated. So that only gets to part of your question, but I'm very confident looking at the intervention pleadings that the interveners are interested in the same questions you're asking.
One more question.
Before you go to your second question, do you have interest in supplemental direct on that question?
I mean, I think Mr. Davis is going to get to a procedural schedule. I don't see it really fitting in, and I agree with Mr. Davis. I've heard echoes of this in some of the intervention pleadings, so I think it will come up, my issue of interest here. The other one may be more interesting and kind of relates to another proceeding, which we already met on this week. So I was curious, do we also have any insight into the influence, if any, of specific actions or investments being made or plans to be made to protect against the possibility of wildfire caused by the utility, like in their currently proposed wildfire mitigation plan, and any influence those might have on the premiums, or if that is considered at all?
The company's testimony, there are two witnesses who have filed testimony in support of granting the application, address this question directly. They argue that the company continues to execute under a wildfire mitigation plan and has one before the Commission in Proceeding 24A 296E. Their proposals show that the company has been and remain committed to addressing risks on the system. And so they see themselves as a leader in the utility industry on wildfire policy and risk mitigation. So I think the company itself thinks these proceedings are somewhat intertwined, and that the outcome of what is included in its wildfire mitigation plan will have an impact on premiums that the company pays, or ratepayers pay as an allocated share of what the holding company pays, based on how well it's mitigated its risks through other actions, not just insurance.
Okay, so perhaps some correlation, but somewhat vague at this point.
Right. Yeah, I think the primary interest of the company here is to secure the ability to recover costs outside of a test year, and that tracking those costs between now and when the next base rate proceeding is important to the company. And these questions, I think, are going to be asked here, but I also think they're going to be asked again and analyzed in more detail in the base rate proceeding that follows.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to bring them up because I think it's interesting and correlated to what else we're seeing. I don't really see the room. I mean, let's talk procedural schedule, but I don't see kind of delaying that. I feel fairly confident that the interveners are probably interested in understanding similar issues, and we'll probably bring them up to the degree it's probably not worth delaying a procedural schedule for supplemental direct on them.
What language in the order? These issues.
Well, I don't think it's necessary.
You want to jump to the procedural schedule?
Sure. Because of the commission, it's a very tight schedule, given the many proceedings that are before the Commission en banc and the Commission generally. I'm going to propose a full procedural schedule today for the Commission to adopt. I would suggest answer testimony be filed on October 18th. I know that sounds like it's very soon, but again, I think the issues here are very narrow, and that the examination of some of these questions is just beginning. Then the rebuttal testimony would be due November 1st. This may be something that is settled. Many times deferred accounting requests are settled. So I would set a deadline for a settlement of November 11th. And then 10 days after that, the Commission could hold a hearing on the 21st of November, and statements of position could follow to be filed no later than December 11th. And that would allow us to take this up at a weekly meeting in late December and render a decision on the request for deferred accounting by the end of the year. I did check your calendars for the 21st, but let's just say that I'll check again later, and it could be around that time.
Okay, and that's the week before Thanksgiving, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly, and it's really that hearing date that's kind of causing the pressure on the pre-filed testimony deadlines remaining.
Okay. I was just panicked checking my schedule.
Oh, I know. Me too. Me too.
Commissioner Plant, comments, questions, vote?
Yeah, I vote to approve the proposed schedule. I need to check on the 21st and make sure that a full date's available. But yeah, I would vote to approve the proposed schedule.
Commissioner Gilman.
Yes, thank you for working out all the details, Mr. Davis, and I would support your procedural schedule.
As do I, and do you have one more issue
Yes.
from council and back row?
Yes. Well, two things. November 11th is, of course, Veterans Day or Armistice Day. So we are closed, so we'll move that to November 12th. That will be fine. And then, as I mentioned earlier, no one's been talking about discovery, and to ease the parties here, I think the Commission should adopt a requirement that responses to discovery requests should be due in 5 calendar days. That matches this expedited pace for the filing of pre-filed testimony, but otherwise the provisions for discovery and our rules should apply.
Commissioner Plant.
I agree with that explanation.
Goman,
I also agree.
as do I, and I think that could be an ABC order consistent with that discussion. Thank you, Mr. Davis. Looks like you're not going anywhere. You're still stuck on the island. 24M-0317EG, funding distribution activities through the TCA.
Right. So this is kind of cool today that we're talking rate case and rate matters. I think that will be
cool would be the word I
Well,
used on this one.
for me. It is a little break from the ERP land. So for this next item, Commission Counsel Aaron McLaughlin will join me, and I'm going to present the filings that were submitted in proceeding 24M-317EG for your consideration and for the potential adoption of a decision this morning. For background, I'll start with advice letter number 1953 electric, and that was submitted by Public Service Company of Colorado in June. And by that tariff filing, Public Service revised its transmission cost adjustment, or TCA, pursuant to certain provisions in Senate Bill 24-218. The updated TCA that became effective on July 21st is intended to recover costs associated with 2024 electric distribution system related activities and investments from the effective date of that statute through December 31st of this year. Public Service explained in the filing that cost recovery would be subject to later true-up as set forth in the tariff red lines that it submitted with the advice letter. The TCA filing was estimated to cause a net increase in the company's revenue through 2024 of approximately $17.1 million compared to the TCA rates that were in effect at the time, and those were rates established to go into effect in January, recovering transmission costs. The TCA rate change was only for customers taking distribution service or service at the distribution level, in other words. Staff filed a protest to that TCA filing on July 10th and requested that the filed tariff sheet be suspended and set for hearing. Staff argued that it had concerns with the lack of testimony or other support for the increase in the TCA rates, an apparent disconnect between the capital additions and the rate base calculation presented, the company's calculation of rate caps to ensure it comports with the caps in Senate Bill 218, and an apparent discrepancy between the revenue effect and the total revenues collected. There was also some uncertainty that the proposed TCA rates would recover a revenue requirement, given that no rate calculations or billing determinations were alleged to be provided, and any and all other matters the trial staff wanted to examine would be examined if the matter was set for hearing. By decision C-24-516 that was issued on July 17th, the Commission permitted the tariff sheets filed by Public Service to take effect by operation of law, notwithstanding staff's protest. The Commission stated that the TCA advice letter filing was not typical and explained that under a typical process, the Commissioners would likely agree with staff that the company's proposed investment filing is inadequate and raises far more questions than answers, such that suspension and hearing would have been appropriate. But the Commission also recognized that Senate Bill 218 moves away from the standard practice towards a statutory approach that quickly moves forward with expanded distribution system investment. So the Commission again declined to set the tariff sheets for hearing and let them go into effect by operation of law. But the Commission also, by decision C-24-541, opened this proceeding to address the proper implementation of other provisions in Senate Bill 218 concerning future TCA filings from the company. This would involve primarily the filings that are yet to come to address distribution activity costs through December 31st of next year, or 2025, and that's also required by Senate Bill 218. The Commission specifically solicited comments from trial staff and responsive comments from Public Service. So this morning, we're going to present those filings so you can decide whether to issue a written decision addressing these future advice letter filings and the subsequent steps necessary to implement the bill itself. So staff timely filed its initial comments on August 14th, and it makes 3 sets of recommendations. First, staff wants the Commission to clarify by decision that the cost of distribution investments recovered through this modified TCA, quote, must directly support the state's decarbonization goals. Second, the Commission should order Public Service to make additional TCA filings in April of 2025 and April of 2026 for the purpose of reviewing the eligibility of the investments from the previous years for TCA cost recovery and for implementing the true-up of revenues associated with those eligible investments. Staff again states that these additional filings would specifically reconcile the revenue requirement of distribution investments made at a project-by-project level review for projects that directly support Colorado's decarbonization goals. And third, staff says the Commission should direct the company to include in its November 1st TCA advice letter filing coming in a month, 1, a complete list of projects and associated capital additions for 2025, where this list would identify for each project, 1, whether the project directly supports decarbonization goals, and 2, whether the company is requesting any waivers or variances associated with moving forward with that project. The filing would also include a reconciliation of distribution capital additions to rate base, a calculation of the revenue requirement and the relationship of that to the applicable statutory rate cap, a complete calculation of the proposed TCA rates, comparable to a rate model. We saw that rate model in the company's response to staff's protest in the June proceeding. Witness testimony explaining how the company determined this list of projects for inclusion in the TCA, including any prioritization methods, localized load forecasting, and the identification of local distribution capacity constraints. And finally, written testimony affirming that the spending complies with relevant Commission decisions, the company's existing tariffs, including its distribution extension policy, the Commission's rules generally, and if the project is inconsistent with any of those, the filing should include an explanation and a request for waiver or variance. Western Resource Advocates, the Colorado Energy Office, and the Colorado Solar and Storage Association, as well as the City of Boulder, also filed comments in response to the Commission's decision. In general, those comments were very supportive of staff's request for additional information, more transparency about the prioritization of the investments, and the nature of the work that's planned to be done in 2025. Public Service timely filed its responsive comments on September 4th with an addition on the 13th. Responding specifically to staff and WRA, Public Service first recommends that the Commission avoid the potential suspension and delayed implementation of the 2025 TCA rates. The company argues that the suspension and the corresponding potential for a full litigated proceeding would undermine the purpose of temporary cost recovery through the TCA in advance of what is called the Grid Modernization Adjustment Clause, or GMAC. That is to be implemented pursuant to the statute following the company's next distribution system plan, and that plan is set to be filed also in November of 2024. Second, with respect to the November 2024 TCA filing, the company agrees to provide, 1, a complete list of projects and associated capital additions for the year, a reconciliation of the capital additions to rate base, a calculation of the revenue requirement and applicable statutory rate cap, and a complete calculation of the proposed TCA rates and direct testimony. So many of those elements echo the nature of the additional information that staff requests the Commission order the company to file. And third, Public Service disputes staff's and WRA's position that TCA cost recovery is only available for investments that directly support the state's decarbonization goals. Instead, Public Service states that Senate Bill 218 specifically defines recoverable, quote, distribution activities as capital investments in operations and maintenance expenses associated with equipment upgrades, repair and replacement programs, conductor replacements, conductor installations, pole repairs and replacement, overhead rebuilds, inspection, modeling, asset data gathering, defect corrections, major line rebuilds. They also can include similar activities and operational technology investments with the objective of enhancing the state's distribution system to meet state decarbonization goals and federal, state, regional, and local and air quality decarbonization targets, standards, plans, and regulations. Public Service thus asks the Commission to reject staff's limits as contrary to the requirements of Senate Bill 218. And fourth, Public Service takes the position that the Commission's requirements associated with distribution system plan filings are not applicable to the upcoming November 1st TCA advice letter filing. Public Service asks the Commission to clarify in its order coming out of this case that the November 1 TCA advice letter to recover 2025 distribution costs is not required or expected to conform to the Commission's filing requirements for a distribution system plan. Fifth, Public Service argues that while the company can agree to requesting any waivers or variances that may be required, in the event of a conflict between a decision or rule and Senate Bill 218, the statutory requirements would control. So Public Service states that the Commission should not adopt any TCA-specific filing requirements for the company to request a waiver or variance, given that the Senate Bill 218 will control. And finally, Public Service asks the Commission to reject the addition of the April TCA filings as suggested by staff and supported by the others, to be clear. The company argues that staff's recommendations are inconsistent with the overall statutory framework for cost recovery prior to the establishment of that GMAC. The company acknowledges that the primary issue for the proposed April proceedings would be determining project eligibility as proposed by staff. However, Public Service argues that the testimony it agrees to submit with the upcoming filing will provide enough information to show that all projects have already been supported. Public Service's additional response filed on September 13th primarily addresses the nuances in the comments filed by the Colorado Energy Office, COSA, and Boulder. So the decision point before you now is whether you want to issue a written decision based on these comments that would address the future advice letter filings and the related subsequent steps needed to implement these cost recovery provisions in SB 218. I can turn it over to you for a discussion on that. I'm also prepared to make some recommendations if that would be helpful.
I think it would be helpful.
Okay. So, given that really long setup here, you can expect.
I don't think it's cool.
Yeah, I do actually. I'm going to put forward a recommendation that has 5 objectives. Okay, and if you have any questions along the ways, please interrupt me. But to start, I think the principal regulatory issue here is that Public Service's TCA collections in 2024 and 2025 must be reconciled with verifiable levels of TCA eligible costs incurred. So I'm very much aligned with staff's position on that. The normal operation of the TCA does not lend itself to an intensive review of costs for such reconciliation, however, because the TCA rate adjustment was not designed for that purpose. The TCA changes only once a year, and ideally, the eligible transmission projects whose costs are recovered through that TCA are reviewed prior to any cost recovery that begins through the TCA. That's generally a CPCN proceeding. Sometimes it's a Rule 3206 filing. Sometimes, or maybe just theoretically, it would be in a transmission plan filed pursuant to Rule 3627. But the point is that these are projects that we've seen before, and these are costs that are coming through, costs that we saw estimates for prior to them going into the TCA. The Commission also strives never to set a TCA rate for hearing and to suspend its effective date primarily to preserve the cash flow benefits that are supposed to accrue to the investment in transmission investments pursuant to other Colorado statutes. So those are some of the elements of the TCA. However, 218 does provide us with some need to review what else might need to happen with it. So first, this is the first recommendation. The Commission's decision should endorse Public Service's response to staff's request for the contents of that November 1st filing. So this would provide staff, the Commission, and other interested persons much more important information about what costs are being recovered for what projects than what we saw in the June advice letter filing. So this would be more information, more tables, more descriptions of projects, and supporting testimony, things that were absent earlier. However, the Commission's endorsement, I think, should also include a determination that the standard for the eligibility of those costs is the unmodified definition of distribution activities in 40-2-1325-2H, which is unlike the statute for eligibility for costs recovered through the GMAC that's established in another part, 40-2-132.57. The second recommendation is that the decision should advise Public Service to remove the true-up provisions that were associated with distribution activities from its TCA tariff sheets filed in June. Those should be removed from the filing that's made on November 1st because the company would risk the TCA filing to be set for hearing and suspended on the Commission's own motion, because upon review of these comments and the suggestions raised by staff primarily, it will be necessary to examine whether that TCA true-up process comports with the requirement in 42-132-5-4D5 that requires reconciliations for 2024 costs to be accomplished in 2025 and reconciliations for 2025 costs to be accomplished in 2024. So, as I said before, the TCA was designed for transmission cost recovery. It's filed once a year, but what that means is that reconciliations are a full year lag, and that does not seem to us to comport with the requirements here for the distribution investment costs being recovered through the TCA. Third, inconsistent with staff suggestions, at least in part, the decision coming out of today's discussion should conclude that Public Service should file an advice letter no later than April 1st, 2025, to address the true-up for the 2024 expenditures on distribution activities. Suggested by staff, the narrow purpose of the filing is to implement the true-up for 2024 and to confirm the eligibility of the incurred project costs. But again, to help facilitate that review, the Commission should confirm that, contrary to staff's position, the standard for eligibility is the unmodified definition of distribution activities in SB 218. Fourth, the decision should advise Public Service to address the true-up for 2025 expenditures as a feature of the GMAC instead of the TCA. The company is supposed to put the GMAC into effect on January 1st, 2026. And so, as I said earlier, the GMAC can be used to do the reconciliation in 2026 for 2025 spending. And the feature of that I really like is that the GMAC is required to be part of the DSP filing due in November 2024. And that is going to be a fully litigated proceeding, which provides the Commission with much more opportunity to review questions being raised here by the parties than otherwise routine TCA or tariff filing. And fifth, the Commission should suggest that staff work very closely with staff this coming month in its preparation for this filing due November 1st. They should work diligently to mitigate potential protests to that advice letter filing. So that was a complex set of recommendations, and I'm happy to answer questions or explain any of those some more. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to you for a discussion and a vote.
Thank you for the detailed analysis and set of recommendations, Mr. Davis. I do have one issue, but I'll take it up after the initial vote, and I did have one question. It sounds like your view of the statute is that it does not require a showing that the investments are consistent with, you know, sort of the clean energy statutes and goals, but it's far broader than that. But staff and the other parties did request information trying to distinguish it, and it seemed like the company was amenable to filing that information and other information in November. So is that request for that type of information, I guess for informational purposes only under your recommendation, consistent with your recommendation, or can it be added to your recommendation? I think, I mean, these expenditures are going to be somewhere between 1.5 and $2 billion as I look at the attachments if they keep going. And I just think the more information we get, the earlier, the better, even if we're going to accept the company's view of the statute.
I think that would be entirely consistent. My recommendation was based primarily on the context that the June filing presented us. But I think that it would be fine and helpful, actually, to increase the transparency if that additional information was provided. And that would be within the context of the overall decision if the recommendation here is adopted, that there would be clarification that the eligibility for recovery is what's in the statute.
And without forcing me to go through issue by issue on informational disclosure, it sounds like you can, in your order, go through the requests of the parties and help us ask for, again, for informational purposes, as much as is appropriate.
Yes, that's very possible.
Commissioner Plant, questions, comments, a vote, anywhere you'd like to go?
Yeah, well, first of all, I support the recommendations and also your addition there, Mr. Chairman. I think that, you know, if there's one thing that we learned from the previous TCA, it's that over time, the interpretation of what the statute means can become very broad. The farther that we get out from the legislation, maybe the more creative the interpretation becomes. So I think it behooves us to look at that through this process. What Mr. Davis, one of the questions I had was one of the things that I heard in the staff recommendation was a rate model, and one of the things I heard from the company was a rate calculation, and I'm wondering if where the request for submitting a model so that the other interveners can look at the impact on rates through the model, where that lies in the process.
Right. In my opinion, there was what I would consider a rate model filed in the June advice letter proceeding, actually. And I think what a rate model does is it shows how a revenue requirement translates into the rates and charges that would be used for billing customers. And so it involves estimates of what billing determinants would be, you know, usage, sales, by rate class, et cetera. And the model does two things. I think it would show how an overall revenue requirement, in June it was a $17 million revenue requirement, translates to the TCA surcharge that took effect on June 1st. It also can be looked at as kind of a reconciliation of estimated sales to and revenues to the target, you know, the 17 million. So I think the elements of a traditional rate model are there. But again, part of the reason why I think the commission should encourage staff and the company to work together on this is to make sure that, you know, staff's understanding of a rate model is satisfied before it's filed. Again, one of the nice things about the TCA, there's a few nice things I could say about it, is that it's filed on November 1st instead of December 1st. And I think that gives the company and others much more time than normal to sort out differences, to file amended advice letters and to supplement the case files over time. And so, Commissioner Plant, I think that if there is a dispute over what is a rate model, there's time to solve that before January 1st.
Great. So thank you.
Commissioner Gilman, anywhere you'd like to go?
Yeah, Mr. Davis, I generally agree with your recommendations as well as the additions I've heard here. And yeah, I mean, looking at staff testimony, it seems difficult that the minority of these investments might go to support electrification, which I understood to be one of the main intents of the bill. So I guess my only elaboration on your first point with regards to the interpretation of distribution activities as it's defined in the bill is, of course, that's within the context of subsection 4, which regards in its entirety the near-term actions. And that can all be evaluated in the true-up to determine the appropriateness of different types of investments that were included and can be reviewed at that time. So perhaps that's the one friendly amendment I would make to your first recommendation.
I'm fine with that clarification, Commissioner Plant.
I am as well.
I had one more issue. I also support the recommendations, but after going through the filings and rereading the statute, I just want to clarify an additional issue. Section 4 of the statute supports a set of near-term investments and guardrails that govern the June and November 2024 tariff filings. More specifically, Section 4D2 imposes clear binding rate impact caps on the amount of revenue coming through the TCA. It states that cost recovery must occur subject to a 0.5% retail rate impact cap on an annualized basis for 2024 and a 1 1/4% retail rate impact cap on an annualized basis for 2025. Given these rate impact caps for the June and November filings, I looked at Attachment A to the staff comments in this M docket, which is a spreadsheet showing the proposed distribution system investment filed as part of the company's June 2024 advice letter filing. As I understand it, that attachment shows roughly $630 million of projected spending over 8 months in 2024. If the pace of investment shown by the company in its June advice letter filing is maintained through 2025, this spending would amount to between $1.5 and $2 billion in cumulative investment by the end of 2025. Depending on the way that such investment is accounted for and trued up, these spending levels, as I understand it, would result in a revenue requirement that is 3 times greater than the statutory rate caps. Subpart 5 of Section 4D goes on to state that the amounts recovered pursuant to this subsection 4D are subject to a true-up with any positive or negative balance credited to customers or recovered by the qualifying utility in the final year. We will see what the company files in the upcoming proceedings, but I would be very concerned if the company's spending prompts a true-up calculation that produces a revenue requirement that is 3 times greater than the rate caps governing the June and November TCA filings. Given this concern, I'd like to request more information sooner rather than later. So as part of the November 1st filing, I would ask the company to provide us with the actual revenue requirement that would result from the 2024 and 2025 spending, and that the revenue requirement that the company expects to come from the 2024 and 2025 true-ups. Said another way, I'd request that the company confirm that the true-up process would not allow for TCA cost recovery materially beyond the rate impact caps, independently of what the company is actually or ultimately spending. For me, if we're looking at rate impacts that could be 3 times the level of the statutory rate impact cap from these initial June and November filings, I will likely struggle to allow the November 1st advice letter filing to move forward without some form of hearing. We'll see what we get in the November filing, but also appreciate there's a subsequent filing in April 2025 as proposed by Mr. Davis that may allow for further scrutiny. So I'll stop there and just ask if you guys are okay with requiring the company to respond to this request in its November filing. I guess, Mr. Davis, I know there was some back and forth on this issue in the June comments that never really got documented in a decision. But do you have any guidance or advice or anything to add to that before I turn it to my colleagues?
No, other than as we've been working through this issue together, Chair Blank, it did cause me to go back to the filings that were done, that were provided in June, and it really did alert me to the possibility that a claim for a revenue requirement on these distribution activities could be significantly higher than the cap, given the investments that were here. And part of the reason I became concerned with this was because it became clear that the amount of costs that were used to design the $17 million TCA increase that started in July was a calculation of a 13-month average of the rate base. And a 13-month average included many months of zero because of the provisions of the statute. Costs could only start being incurred in May. So that $600 million of spending on a 13-month average was reduced to $223 million. And the company disclosed all this, but thinking about that some more, it's very important to know ahead of time what is going to be the bogey for the true up. Is it going to be that 13-month average that was shown to us in June, or is it going to be some other amount? And so, while I haven't really agreed with some of staff's filings, I think very important part of the April filing will be to enable the commission, if it sees something that you just described that's out of whack, to have a hearing without putting in jeopardy the regular functioning of the TCA, and to not disrupt the intention of 218 with respect to recovering costs in 2025. So I think that's excellent, and I think what you've just described as tell us what you're going to do in November. Yeah. I think makes a lot of sense.
Commissioner Plant, comments, concerns, vote, anywhere you'd like to go.
Yeah, no, I support that approach. Yeah, nothing else to add.
Commissioner Gelman?
Yeah, it seems somewhat obvious to me to the extent that the company needs the November filing to move along swiftly and without drama. It would be incumbent upon them to ensure that it looks as though they will be adhering to the cost caps within the statute to move things along quickly and without drama.
Amen. And if you can help us draft that as best as possible, Mr. Davis, that'd be great.
Thank you. And Ms. McLaughlin, do you have enough to help us through that order?
Writing diligently. Thank you, I do.
And I think that can be an ABC order. Is that okay with you, Commissioner Plant?
Yes, it is.
Commissioner Gelman?
Yes.
And thank you, Mr. Davis, again. Really appreciate it. 24V0413EG, variance on DSMCA adjustment. Mr. Mendelson.
I'm Mike Mendelson of your advisory team. Last week, Public Service Company filed a petition seeking a one-time extension of their electric and gas DSMCA filings to no later than 11/29/2024. Otherwise, these tariff revisions were due yesterday, October 1, 2024. Public Service explains they seek the extension of the DCMCA filings for two reasons. First, the company is filing its Clean Heat Plan, or CHP, compliance filing by October 21. The company explains putting in place the CHP compliance filing before the company submits its DSMCA filing tariff changes for 2025 will avoid confusion and potentially avoid future rate change requests to the DSMCA. Second, by delaying the DSMCA tariff, the company will be able to align the 2025 DSM and CHP budgets, which overlap quite a bit. Public Service states it does not foresee the need for a similar extension in future years. The company states that it circulated this petition to the parties to the company's 24 to 2026 DSM and BE plan, and none objected to the variance requested in this petition. Accordingly, Public Service also seeks waiver of the notice and intervention periods provided for in Rules 1206A and D. Advisors recommend at this time granting the company's three-part request. First, waiving the notice and intervention periods otherwise applicable to this petition. Two, granting its petition for a one-time partial variance of the October 1 annual filing as it relates to both relevant gas and electric rules. And three, extending to November 29, 2024, the date for filing revisions to the gas and electric DSMCA tariffs to become effective January 1, 2025, reflect calendar year 2025 costs. I'll pause here for your discussion or vote.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman,
I also agree.
as do I, and that could be an ABC decision.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mendelson. Commissioner Plant, anything before we adjourn?
No, nothing further. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Gilman,
Nothing additional, thanks.
with that, Survivor PUC edition is adjourned. Thank you.